Welcome back, everybody. This is something new. So thank you for watching all of our events. We're about to begin our panel discussion, and I'd like to do just some introductions. First of all, starting with me, I'm David Hibbert, composer and director of Multiverse Concert Series. And back, our keynote speaker, we have Dr. Michael Albro of Fermilab, and he is now Professor Emeritus and continues to research with Fermilab and CERN, writing and talking about science. We have Dr. Lisa Maseri, Assistant Professor of Social Cultural Anthropology at Yale. I'm sure you all got to see her talk about VR and the tech industry, equality and representation. And we're joined by the creators of our gallery, the curators Julia of SciArt Initiative, Lula and Merichel of CLOT Magazine, and last but not least, Matt Russo of System Sounds, who presented and performed so beautifully in the concert. And he is also a lecturer at physics lecturer at the University of Toronto. So I hope you'll all agree that art and science have generated a wealth of excitement and stimulation around the theme of exoplanetary discovery. In our panel conversation, we hope to discover the deep links between art and science and how together they can reveal a universe of exoplanets and what that means for us as individuals. So we've received some questions, and we are still open for questions now, so that you can put them into Zoom or you can put them into the gallery, and we will have time for some of those. But we'll also have time for the panelists if they have questions for each other. But I want to begin. Mike, do you have an image for us to get us started?
Oh, thank you. Yes. Okay. Let me bring that up and share the screen. You probably are quite familiar with this. Can you see this one?
So,
can you see this?
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yes.
Right. So this is, of course, an artist's impression, as we've seen, and we heard from Ed his wonderful work in imagining images on other planets. And this is one of the planets in the TRAPPIST system. And you see the star, it's a small red star, but we're rather close to it. And two other planets, which actually may see disks from this because they're all quite close to each other. So this was, I think this is one of the very inspiring sort of things to stretch our imagination. I mean, we still only see these planets as points of light, but we learn about them, about their temperatures and their gravity and so on. And we can stretch our imaginations, and artists are doing this, and it's really inspiring us. So I think that is there's one of the great things about this.
So we've all seen that image, and we've seen plenty more like that over the course of the day. So my question is, and it's open, I want someone to jump in here. You've seen that image. To any of our panelists, would you want to go there? And if yes, given that we can't, at least in our lifetime, how does your medium, be that science, art, discussion, research, music, how does your medium take us closer to experiencing other worlds?
May I just say, I would love to be there, but I wouldn't want to go there, because to go there would take thousands of years at the fastest rockets that we know about. I'd love to be on one of these planets. If I could cope with the rather different gravity, the different atmosphere, the different light, and so on. But it would be, of course, amazing. Having said that, we can find amazingly alien environments on Earth by going deep in the ocean and so on. So there are plenty of variety of environments also on Earth, right?
Well, let's ask a musician, Matt. Would you want to go there, assuming we could keep you safe somehow? And then how could music take us closer?
Yeah, like despite the gorgeous imagery that's been created, I still think of TRAPPIST-1 planets as a hellhole. Like I think it would be just terrible for someone that's evolved on Earth and to be, used to our comfy surroundings. Like some things are nice about the TRAPPIST planets, the temperature and in some spots, and that there's water. But there's also like damaging X-rays, and it's really not clear, and we don't know what the atmospheres are. So I wouldn't take that chance. It's cool that Michael would, but what I find most fascinating about the system is its orbital resonances, right? And so I think that by converting the system's motion into music, we get to appreciate this like very simple regularity of the system. And so I think that takes us closer to what it would be like to live there, because if any intelligent life evolved on one of the TRAPPIST-1 planets, the planets, as you saw in the image, they're huge in the sky. Like some of them would be twice as big as the moon. And so this would be an ever-present feature of their sky. And there's tons, 6 other planets around. And so they would be even more in tune with the regularity of nature from an early point. And they would probably even be more likely than we were to see some kind of design, even though it's not really what's going on. But I think that it would be a different perspective. Someone learning, evolving on a system like that with such very simple, regular patterns in the skies, because ours isn't quite like that.
Thanks, Matt. I might open that. Let's see. Lisa, I mean, would you want to go there, or have maybe your descendants go there? And how can we get closer?
The closest I've ever gotten to being off Earth was going to the Mars Desert Research Station in the Utah desert, and simulating with a couple of NASA scientists what an early mission to Mars might be like. And it was a profoundly uncomfortable experience. And any desire I ever had to be an intrepid explorer was squashed. I don't even like camping very much, I ought to say. So so I can't say I am going, clamoring to leave our beautiful planet, but it is, I mean, a lot of my research, my anthropological research, is about the desire to make these alien and probably uncomfortable planets into worlds and places. And, to me, that's the question, right? Why is there this kind of profound push, whether from the scientist, from the artist, to connect with the alien?
We immediately connect, don't we? We just see, as soon as it enters that, something we can process with the eye or the ear, then that connection is just immediate. And then we also...
But is it immediate, right? I mean, everyone who talked today talked about the beautiful work they're doing and how intense it is, right? It takes a whole lot of work to make solar systems into music, and to turn invisible exoplanets into tangible landscapes, and to write books about anthropology. So, I mean, I think to me, that's like what's so marvelous is all of the scientific and artistic work that necessarily must go in to that immediacy.
So you think that it's still a long way off unless you really dig deep? Well, I hope together we can do something about that. I mean, that is the secret goal of this event, is to bring it all closer. Well, I can, does anybody really not want to go? No, we're all up for it. Great.
I don't know if you've all heard about the Dear Moon project, but this is something you can find online. I'm blanking on his name. A Japanese billionaire essentially decided that citizens should be able to go into space, especially citizens who fall within sort of the creative disciplines, so that they can make works or produce things upon coming back from orbiting the moon that will kind of help humanity better understand, our relationship with this potential future that we have. Because so far we only have astronauts and scientists going up into space. And as much as they may try to communicate kind of the breadth of the human experience, that's really what creatives and artists are experts in. And so I'm highly anticipating this private mission. He's basically bought 8 seats upon a SpaceX rocket for the year, I think it might be 2023. I can't remember, but it's soon. And I think that will really, assuming it all happens, which maybe won't happen on time, but the tickets are reserved. It will be really interesting to see how that can impact people's minds. There are so many people out there who don't think we should be going into space at all, who don't think that we should be going to other planets at all, who think that there's an irresponsibility associated with trying to occupy other planets while we still have issues on our own. I don't think you have to choose one over the other, but that will be, that could really cause like a cultural shift, which about thinking about going into space, which hasn't really existed. It's, starting to ramp up with all these private companies now, but it hasn't really existed since the space race in the 60s. People haven't really been excited about space in a long, long time.
Do we think that this...
Remind us, if I may, that there's another alien environment that we haven't really occupied, which is the deep ocean floor, which is a very alien environment. And it would seem to be much easier before establishing a colony on Mars to establish a living colony on the deep ocean floor, which is something else. I mean, we do explore it, but anyway.
Would you go to the deep ocean?
I would love to if I'm assured a return ticket. But
see, I would not go to the deep ocean, but I would go to space. Something about being underwater.
Scuba diving when I can, and I love that. And that is an alien environment.
What about an ocean world? Would you go to Europa beneath the icy surface?
No.
No?
I want some land involved. Yeah. Like, put me on Mars. I went to Burning Man. I can hack it in the desert for a week. I'm sure I could do it for longer in much harsher conditions. Yeah, but like you said, David, there are, so many different types of worlds, and some of them will be a lot harder for us to interact with than others.
Well, I'm going to take another something I've prepared. So you're right. We're all, we're kind of preaching to the choir here. Everybody in this panel and everybody we'll be interested to hear if not, but people in our audience are passionate about space, exoplanets, exploring both through science and through discussion and art, and see that as valuable. But of course, I don't know. Are we the minority? I'd be interested to see whether we are. But to sort of counter that, my question is, how can knowledge, scientific and artistic, of exoplanets help us make a better world on Earth for us humans?
I think it's had an enormous effect to see the Earth from the moon and to see that we are, in fact, inhabiting an extremely thin shell on the Earth. I mean, it's like if the Earth is a ball like that, it's like a sheet of paper, and that is where all life is, and it's all connected and so fragile. And I think this has been one of the major things about actually going to the moon, was the view of the Earth as a fragile ecosystem that we have to really look after. And of course, we're not looking after it enough. Yeah.
Anybody else? I mean, maybe is that too lofty a goal? I mean, are we part? I certainly think we can help. I think that what we're doing is making a difference, or I wouldn't be here. But I think the way that it helps, it's not a linear thing. We put ideas and emotions out there, and then it's difficult to see how people are going to respond. But does anybody want to take that? How events like this and knowledge of space, how can it make us better?
Well, it definitely could lead to the development of new technology for a particular otherworldly scenario, which could be applied back here on Earth. Mm-hmm. If that technology, say, does something more efficiently than we currently know how to do. New opportunities will present us with new challenges that we'll solve, and then we can kind of reapply that back here, whether it's talking about oxygen production or how to desalinate water or, various sorts of things. So I suspect that will happen and that will improve our own kind of ecosystem and help with the various and complex aspects of climate change.
Yeah, I'd say these are practical considerations, but just the joy of music, the joy of art, improving people's lives in that way, not a practical way, is part of what it's all about, right? And this comes by sharing this with as many people as possible, education and so on. I mean, all kids should leave school knowing about stars and planets and so on, and I hope they do. But
I think joy is the word I keep coming back to. I think I've seen, working with you all, I've seen joy in different ways. For me, it comes from the writing and the personal discovery, and then sharing is sort of the other part of that circuit. What about you, Matt?
I love the way Michael just put it. I completely agree that things like art and science, learning new things about the universe we live in and about other people, that's the stuff that makes life worth living. So I don't think I never focus on the practical considerations, which are important and life-saving, but to me that's something that we all share across cultures, is that joy and wonder of experiencing something and understanding something bigger than your own than yourself.
And then maybe knowing that that's the world we live in, we might want to take care of it more. That's the sort of conclusion I hope that we will all come to through this. Well, I want to get the visual artists in the conversation here, and I've been able to just watch the three of you, Marichelle, Lula, and Julia, work with New Art City and put together this absolutely stunning gallery. And I have so much I want to learn about that process. So to any of you, how did you go about curating a gallery of exoplanetary art? What were your goals going in, and what were the main challenges that you overcame?
Great question. How did we do it? It was I'll let Marichelle speak to and Lewis speak to kind of the conception of the show, because they really pioneered that aspect of it. But it was an extremely organic process, I would say. We are familiar with a lot of the same artists, but also we're able to bring in people that we weren't necessarily aware of each other. And it was very organic and it was very fun. It was really, really fun.
Yeah, no, that's true. Sometimes these situations can be can go very well, or can be just just not for any reason, but just sometimes just clash. No, it was super fun. And I think when we started planning about it, it's what would we highlight, or the main aspects on how we relate to exoplanets. I think that was our first question, how we think about exoplanets. First, what it would be to think about life in an exoplanet. I think that's the best, one of the first questions. Then what it would be like, of course, space travel, and what would be if we travel to exoplanets, what would happen there? And there's this project that it's in the gallery exhibit by Albert Duran and Mark Marcenit, in which they explore what would be producing art while you're space traveling, and what it would be like making music. And that's what another of the beautiful questions that we thought what would be people doing, and also how artists interpret how is the vision, the work of Ed Bell, for example, and the designers that do 3D renderings, imagining all these planets. So I think those were three lines of thought, or the main ones. And then I started just thinking who could be interesting, and also who tells a story about as well. And it all start coming up together. One of the things I also and we as a team, I think everyone agreed, is just to try to emphasize a bit, or to start thinking about exoplanets in a way that just putting it away, like the colony kind of like mentality, a way of this, like why we still like talking about colonizing an exoplanet, not visiting, or I don't know. I guess like it's maybe we are more aware these days about all these things and these wordings, but it was also important for us. And the work of Nicole Lue emphasizes a lot about that. So you visit the gallery, it's an incredible piece as well as all the rest. Just a brief overview. I don't know if Lula wants to add something else, or like Julia as well.
Yeah, it's essentially, curating can happen a number of different ways. But for us, it was thinking of who have we been paying attention to for the last couple of years, and whose work do we really love to support and follow, and kind of who fits the bill, but also having a nice balance between video and still, and being able to include some kind of sculptural elements with some of the videos. And we could have made a larger show, but we decided on this kind of really tight group of artists who covered different ground.
Yeah.
Was there anything that you really wanted to do, but found that there were limitations in either within the art or within the technology to present it? I mean, I think I think I'm speaking here, but it's worked rather well with New Art City, and it really came off. Everything that I heard that you wanted to do, I think has come off. But were there any things that you didn't work out this time?
I did miss something, like smell. There's been a few projects that like we've been either featured or just found out, but like trying to recreate the smell of space, and just people like work with smell, and that's like have talked with astronauts, and like the smell of sulfur, and like and there's been like a few, and I would if we had like an in situ installations, I would have loved like a little smell, because all this like smell is a very potent emotion, so it's stuck in the visitor's mind. So yeah, I miss including something like that, but it's very difficult if you include something. Well, Annie's project is that, but it's more poetic. It's the poetic of the narrative rather than the smell itself. So yeah.
Yeah, otherwise I don't think so. And New Art City is a fabulous platform. They were really wonderful to work with. The show's going to be up for a year, so this won't be the last time that we're doing events within the gallery. For those who are listening in, stay tuned for that. But it's what it has enabled, on top of just being able to put on an art show in such a difficult, restricted time, it's enabled us to put on an international art show. It's enabled us to have an international audience who all have equal access to the gallery, and that's really a wonderful side of kind of what's been happening for the last year with access to events. Geography no longer applies. Internet connection is the lowest common denominator, and it's just enabled us to do things we couldn't have done before. So there are always limitations, of course, but in this case, I think there were just more opportunities we could explore.
I think it's wonderful that we're able, especially we've managed to get the time, so we've got at least 2 continents in the audience today, and I think we will try that again. I mean, we're all just trying to reach people. I think that's something we've all got in common. We think and we dig deep to try and come up with something important, and then of course you want to share it, and then how do you do that in this age? And I think we just have to keep trying new formats, and I think we'll be doing this one again. Do you know, this whole Zoom environment, after a while I start to think that maybe we're all on different planets, or maybe some of us are on generation ships traveling to distant exoplanets, and this is, and then you could live your whole life in your own small house environment, and then your other humans are just on. So we perhaps we're already there.
I've been thinking about that a lot, actually. Like especially like in London, there's a full lockdown, and we've been having it for like 3 months now. And I think like my world is just these things that actually you see, and not a lot more. So in our own, we're in our own planet, apart from inside here.
It's both smaller and larger, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which brings me to a question from the audience. What role, if any, did sci-fi play in your professional development? And should we start with Mike? Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I'm an old person, and for me, sci-fi when I was a teenager was H.G. Wells and Jules Verne, and the first Men on the Moon and so on, and that was really inspiring to me as a teenager. So it did I think help me on the road to science then. Yeah, but not so much Star Wars. I can't really take that because it's got so much that is rubbish, in like zipping around between planets at 100 times the speed of light or something. Like, on the other hand, The Martian I thought was a very good movie because it did seem to be reasonably scientifically correct.
What about you, Lisa? Science fiction have a role to play?
One of my favorite books growing up was Ender's Game, which is about, kind of a future in which children are trained to play simulations that are really about annihilating an alien race. And, that it wasn't a tale about a hero, right? It was very much a tale about someone who didn't want the power that I think that, the human race was asking him to take on. And that was kind of the main, I wasn't actually a big sci-fi kid, but that one kind of story and just that way of thinking about the universe, I think was really powerful. And I loved astronomy. I grew up, I was just such an astronomy nerd. I went to astrophysics summer camp. When I went to college, I thought I would be an astrophysicist, and I ended up working at, doing aerospace engineering. So that like kind of imagination of space that I got at that early age was very important. Since then, I actually read a whole lot more sci-fi now because I'm often trying to read the same fictional works that the people I study are themselves immersed in. So when I was doing exoplanet stuff, I read all of Kim Stanley Robinson's trilogy and watched some Star Wars-y things and some Star Trek-y things and, Firefly and Battlestar Galactica and kind of all these different kind of sci-fi imaginaries that community was working with. And now I'm watching some real terrible trash sci-fi like Lawnmower Man and these really horrendous 1990s imaginations of cyberspace. And but they're powerful not only for it's really complicated. I'm now on this meta level of thinking about sci-fi because I'm really fascinated with how engineers, for example, get influenced by sci-fi, build a technology, and then folks in Hollywood take that technology and tell a new story about it. And there's kind of this cyclical relationship between technological innovation and the stories we tell about that innovation. So I think I've now intellectualized sci-fi too much for me to enjoy it in that same pure way, but I certainly think about it a lot.
Do you think there's a danger with science fiction in that it can lead us away from the real science?
Can I add a comment to that?
Oh yeah, sure.
Because I read in the 60s and so on, a couple of favorite authors were A.C. Clarke, who was quite serious, but also Fred Hoyle. I don't know if everybody knows Fred Hoyle, but he had some brilliant. Fred Hoyle invented the term the Big Bang. He didn't believe in it, but he invented the term, and he actually made an extremely important observation about how carbon could be produced in stars. But two favorite science fiction stories that he wrote was A for Andromeda, which was a radio series and turned into a book. And that was how an alien civilization could invade Earth by sending a radio message. Okay, it was a coded message that went on for days and then repeated itself. And we understood that this was actually instructions for building a computer and then a program and then data to put into it. And it made us on Earth create life from a star in the Andromedan constellation, not galaxy. And then there was a black cloud, which was a vast cloud that came and sat around the sun, getting energy from it. These were alien life forms, but brilliantly described by Fred Hoyle, who was a serious scientist. So I did love that.
Well, and there's that, and also Carl Sagan, right? He both was a serious science popularizer, and a real fiction. He wrote Contact and other things. Right. I don't know if we have that model as much anymore, right? Of the scientist who is also really writing fiction that's in the public sphere in that way.
Yeah. Well, spoiler alert, I have a science fiction story on my back burner, which is
Ooh.
You'll be the next Hoyle / Sagan.
So I can't, I guess science fiction influenced my professional development in that that's how I became interested in kind of science in general. I ended up becoming more interested in neuroscience, which is the degree that I pursued. But, you know, as a teenager watching Star Trek, that was really, really eye-opening. And the way that sci-fi has impacted my life has really been on a personal level. There is nothing I love more than science fiction. I love good science fiction. I love bad science fiction. I love it all. Books, movies, TV shows. I consume it regularly and voraciously. And I think that's because, you know, I love planet Earth. I really do. Planet Earth is beautiful and wonderful, and life is rich and great in so many ways. But I have that kind of bug. You know, I feel like there's in a multiverse reality, if we believe in that, there's a Julia that, you know, became an astronaut for sure. And so yeah, through what's wonderful about things like books and movies is that you get to spend a little bit of time pretending you're somebody else, or kind of living another life and getting that experience. And there's been some really fantastic literature put out in the last couple of years. The 3-Body Problem is a book I'd really, really recommend for people who are interested in contemporary science fiction that does a really good job bringing us far, far out into space, into very weird zones, which we haven't visited before, but does so beautifully. And it's the author is named Sichin Liu. He's from China. So that's what I would recommend to everybody. But yeah, it's science fiction is one of those things that, like Lisa was saying, it's so interesting to see how writers and creatives kind of invent technologies, and then you end up seeing them, you know, a couple of decades later, like the cell phone or like the iPad. You know, they have these things like that, you know, Star Trek was kind of emulating back in the 90s, and then lo and behold, you know, they look pretty much exactly the same. And now the new trend is to have all these like clear touch screens. So I'm wondering like when those are going to pop up, because I'm sure they will.
You see the scene where Picard has a stack of iPads, and they think,
oh yeah,
so close.
And he's like, oh, I have to go through all of these iPads.
You know. Well, I was gonna. Oh, did you have something, Rachel?
No. Just we can go on. I was like, I was about to share my sci-fi.
Oh, go on.
No. I think for me, I always seen like a sci-fi more as a state of mind, and I was very drawn into, well, just early, younger, like what the Twilight Zone. I would say these like strange worlds, the horror as well. But I think for me, aesthetically, Tarkovsky's sci-fi has been one of the most, I don't know, just like the one that like probably has impacted me mostly. That kind of very poetic and state of mind kind of sci-fi.
Like Solaris.
Sorry?
Like Solaris.
Yeah,
beautiful
and
movie.
Stalker as well, which you can say it's sci-fi or not, but yeah.
Yeah.
But there's always a weird place in his movies. So yeah.
Matt, I've been watching you. I'm guessing the science fiction is important to you too.
Actually, no.
Oh,
I'm one of the rare scientists that I just never connected with science fiction, and the ones I did, it really, you know, the best science fiction to me is, you know, it's not really about the science. Like the parts I liked are like the fantastical Kurt Vonnegut books, or even Star Trek, where it's nothing to do with the science that I enjoy. It's more like the morality plays. And so I never really connected with science fiction as a genre for some reason. Not sure what's going on.
Well, that's so interesting. And yet here you are, being incredibly imaginative with science and with art and music. Yeah, I think. Well, I was going to suggest, you know, science fiction is sort of science plus imagination, but obviously it's not that simple. I've got a question for you, Matt. it's one I think about a lot as a composer. So I've been sort of dying to know what you think, because we have these direct representations. I mean, this can open up to the visual artists as well. So you take the data that you have and you come up with a direct visualization or a sonification of something, and that's good. But then we like to go further and then expand on it and turn it into an artwork, if that's a novel or a visual art or a piece of music. And I always think about what does that process mean? What goes on in that process? What's the potential of it? And then is it possible to get lost in it and lose the science somehow and lose the point? So I wonder your take.
Yeah, so I'd start by saying, like, the types of translation you said were kind of direct, like visualization and the more direct sonifications. In a lot of cases, those aren't as direct as they seem. Like even space imagery, when you're taking data from X-rays and UV rays, and there's some artistry involved in translating that into a form our eyes can experience. And the same thing with even the most direct sonifications. There's usually choices along the way. Some are better than others, but once you've got that, like the next kind of step for me is always, there's kind of two parts to it. One is trying to identify what is the most essential thing about the data, as in, like, what story do I want to tell? What do I want to bring people's attention to? What's the interesting fact about this system that I can communicate through the data? And so then I have to find a musical way to do that. But there is a completely artistic side, which is like I have to think about what I feel when I'm learning about this system and understanding the data, and I kind of nudge it into something that makes sense aesthetically for me. And I hope that there's enough kind of correspondences between why I'm feeling that way and the information that's actually in the system that it'll connect with someone else. So it's always a balance between being true to the data and communicating something real about the system, about the science of the system, and finding a way to make it connect emotionally with people at the same time. So always a balance. So I think that kind of answers the first part of, like, why do it? That's a huge win. If you can connect with people with something emotionally, that kind of invites them in and instigates them inspires them to learn more about the system. And there are some downsides, though. Like, a lot of times it's easy for people to misunderstand what they're hearing, because they may think it's more direct than it actually is. And so if I sonify an image, I can, just reading the YouTube or Twitter comments, like, a lot of people just think that it's really like the sound of this galaxy, like there was a microphone there or something. So it's always a challenge communicating the process that went from one to the other.
Yeah, I'm always trying to avoid the pitfalls, and you're a unique case, Matt, because you're a scientist and a musician. So you have that dual expertise, and you're not going to make a fundamental error. But then the rest of us who are artists or who are kind of working with scientists, we're not just trying to avoid mistakes. We're also trying to grasp what is most important, and that can be hard, because it's easy to get wowed by something, but then that can perhaps lead you astray. I think it's all getting down to what is the value of art in the science realm, and maybe that's a big question. But does anybody else want to take that one up?
Well, I can't help thinking about something where music and astronomy are closely connected in this following sense. If you were in Britain, you would know about this program called The Sky at Night, which Patrick Moore started back in 1957. Actually, I could go to his garden and look through his telescope because he didn't live far from me, but he chose a piece of theme music from Sibelius called The Castle Gate. And it's a beautiful piece of music, and it goes so well with astronomy. And I'm sure a lot of people, that program's still going 67 years later. I mean, he passed a few years ago, but this was such an inspiring program. And when it started, it was only black and white TV, and there were 2 channels from BBC, and that was it, you know. But he had the personality, the charisma, and he'd get people like Carl Sagan and Neil Armstrong and people to come on his programs. And of course, you know, he showed lots of beautiful pictures from the sky. So this was bringing together music, art, and astronomy and science. And I just wanted to mention that because I think, you know, the severity, it gives you feeling. Music gives you feelings, right? And looking at planets gives you feelings, even if you don't know the science of them. So,
and the emotions could just jump from one to the other, can't they?
Yeah.
If you feel an emotion and you feel it 2 different situations, there's a natural connection there, even though the sort of cerebral connection is harder to fathom. Oh yes, sorry. Go. Who is that?
I was just going to say that's really the power of music is to have such a direct connection with the person who's experiencing it. You can't just like walk by music like you can walk by a painting. I love paintings. Paintings can be really phenomenal and have a really deep impact on people, but there is something really special about just the connective ability of music to really get to the core of somebody pretty immediately, if it's going to at all. And so, you know, I think, you know, what's the role of art in terms of science? There are so many, but kind of, you know, relevant to our discussion here. You know, today we've talked about scientific visualization, so literally being able to explain science through visualization. That's one aspect, but I think kind of the more important and larger aspect is just being able to offer people a way into science that is easier than an article or a graph or a chart or anything which you might find in a textbook. You know, visual art does not use a specific language. It doesn't require a certain education level. You know, it's really, really the audience for visual art and the arts in general is so broad. And if you're a good artist, you usually try to cater to a really broad audience, and you usually find a way to invite people into your subject matter in a number of ways so that they can engage with the content either on, you know, a kind of surface level, or they can dive deeper if they choose to. So I think, you know, it's been really wonderful to see over the past couple of decades, visual artists really turning to science and saying, this is going to be my content now, instead of, you know, there's a million things to make art about, right? Making art about science is difficult because if you're going to do it well, it takes the work to connect with scientists or to learn how to read primary research articles and really do the science justice, so that your audience walks away with something that's experience of science, even if it's just a tidbit. You know, maybe they'll be inspired to pick up that Scientific American issue and actually read it for the first time and start to really engage with these subjects. So that's really what I see the role of art as doing. And exoplanets are just kind of the next latest thing. There's always something on the frontier, especially with things that, we don't know a lot about. I live in the world of neuroscience-based art, which is another really unexplored frontier, much like the ocean. So artists can actually help us, you know, imagine the things the way that things might be. And then maybe the science will prove that later on, or maybe it won't. But it at least kind of inspires people to, you know, take another look at the world around them and not take it for granted.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, that sense of appreciation, I think, if you're coming at, I mean, we're all different in the way that we use our senses, and some of us prefer to read, to listen, to discuss, to use our hands. And you know, science, you know, increasingly is moving beyond what any individual could do. I don't know, maybe Michael can come in, but it seems like the collaborations are getting bigger. The technology is composed of systems within systems, and it gets, you know, as we get more advanced, it gets more distant from everybody except the experts. And I think, you know, we've got to do a lot more than just you know, galleries and concerts. We've got to come at this knowledge in so many more ways, because I strongly believe it's for everyone, but it has to feel like it's for everyone, and that doesn't seem like it's going to happen by itself. What more do you think we can do?
Well, let me just comment, because I work at Fermilab and I worked at CERN in both places, which are pure science labs, but they recognize the value of an artistic connection, and they invite artists. And they have now the founder of Fermilab, Bob Wilson, who was a sort of polymath. I mean, he was a sculptor as well as a scientist and engineer and so on. And CERN also in Geneva. I mean, you're right. We're working in collaborations of thousands of scientists from all over the world, and it's become so different. Still, you do have a chance of seeing something that nobody else saw before, of finding something like that, which is a real emotional thing. But CERN and Fermilab have art galleries and musical events and so on and so forth. So I think actually that physicists typically love music, generally speaking. I don't know why. There's some connection, a deep connection between physics and music, it seems to me. Anyway.
Lisa, what do you think? What more can we do to spread this knowledge and this appreciation, and then hopefully, spur us to action?
Well, I suppose I will offer, I don't know if this is contrarian. Maybe I'm just going to choose to answer a different question instead. But, there's something that makes me very uncomfortable about conversations, either what can art do for science or what can science do for art, right? It puts these two disciplines into a service arrangement, which is not to say we don't need those kind of relationships. I think it's incredibly important to figure out how to better communicate and how to be inspired. All that is very important. But I guess I personally find myself most inspired by projects that operate orthogonally to that relationship. So actually, I'm thinking about Annie's talk, just the one before, what she's doing, and some artists similar to her are, really taking deep study of either science or technology, but then repositioning it to be able to say something not about what is the science, but instead about kind of a greater concern, whether that's kind of gender dynamics in society or other kind of inequalities, almost like using science as a way to then refocus to some of the other broader concerns that we share together. So I guess I find myself most compelled and most excited. I'm inspired by everything I've heard today, but there's something that is working contrary to that direct relationship between art and science, or the direct influential relationship between art and science, that I'm quite inspired by.
I mean, that's fascinating. I think so. Orthogonal. So instead of direct, it's towards something else.
I'm using a technical term here right now. Like a right angle, right? If we think about the science-art relationship going somehow back and forth, then there's these other projects which kind of take it into a new direction. And that interests me.
We should give that a name then. So instead of the science and art, the name of the thing that they can achieve together, or that they can both co-create.
There are already other names.
There are a million names. That's the problem.
Hybrid art and all those.
There are too many names. No one can decide on one.
Yeah. Or even for SciArt, or the science and art and this.
Yeah.
Questions from the audience then. This is, let's see if we have time for both. Do you think we are very influenced by our planet when it comes to creating art? If humans traveled to another planet, would living there change our art forms?
Well, I particularly like this question because I'm a molecular biologist and biochemist. And I think, if I can jump in, the scientist in me, I think our thoughts and how we interpret whatever we do, and also Julia, here as well, It'd be nice to talk to you, to have your dialogue affect how runs fire, how like the transporters work. So, and this works in planet Earth, or in the conditions we are. If you put us in any other environment, that would change. So I would say my question would be, that it would be completely different.
Yeah, like you, my mind immediately went to, okay, well, how's the biology going to work? And how are the physics that are interacting with that biology? You know, what does that look like? So
I can help seeing like the molecules and the transporters and opening gates and firing.
And yeah, I think that's, you know, that could be a really interesting way that art could change. But I also immediately think that, no, I don't think it would change that much. I think human beings are human beings. We develop our cultures that we do, and every culture, you know, has, you know, particular art forms that are born from it. But increasingly, you know, our culture is becoming kind of an Earth culture. So maybe there will be like, you know, a Mars kind of culture of art that would look different, but that would take a long time to develop. And maybe it would be influenced by the different physics that are going on. Or if we have actual Martians someday, you know, maybe they will think a little bit differently because they'll be like way too tall. And they'll make taller things because of it. I don't know.
What about music? I mean, Matt, we should think about this. Music, you know, if it's moving through a different, you need something for the sound pressure waves to travel through. So you need an atmosphere of some sort.
Yeah, I mean, I'd bet that most life in the universe is probably happening underwater too, and it's just so plentiful, and it, you know, has all these benefits for forming complex molecules. So like I think it's more likely that there's, you know, space fish than space squirrels or something like that. And so you know, sound travels differently underwater, travels faster, but it also filters out frequencies and muffles what's possible. So yeah, it'd be interesting.
Have any of you composed music for playing through water?
Not yet. Not
Okay.
yet.
Homework problem.
Sounds like a challenge. I think a lot of instruments, you have to redesign the instruments.
Yeah.
Again, sounds like another good challenge.
Yeah, I think that project that was trying to make music on zero gravity, they had to redesign everything, like all the objects, and even how like the position with your instrument is just like completely like, what is this? And as well, like, yeah, how the sound was like traveling and all sorts of things. It was completely, yeah, the process, apparently they just realized that the process was completely different. You're like making music or playing an instrument, well, meant something completely different. Also, I think, was it something of like the keyboard, how the keyboard was behaving as well, and how you put, yeah, it was.
Pianos, all pianos need gravity to work. So you got
yeah.
spring action instead, I guess.
But you could experiment with playing woodwind instruments or brass instruments in tanks with different atmospheric pressures, like 2 atmospheres or 0.5 atmospheres. That would change it all, and that would be fun.
I do play the trombone. Sign me up.
There you go. Get in a pressure tank.
Right, you are. I got one more question from the audience, and then we've got a lot of thank yous to do. Here's the question. Music is the sound of math. Could that be why physicists like music? What do we think?
I think there is something deep going on. You know, there's something in our brain that responds to simple ratios in music. It's physics going on in our brain, but that also connects with our emotional centers somehow. So there is a deep connection there. But from like personally, when I was learning music, I learned on a very spatial instrument, the guitar. Some aren't as spatial, but for me, I always picture in terms of shapes, picture what I'm playing in terms of shapes. And then when I'm doing physics, I'm usually thinking about shapes and geometry. And so for me personally, there was an obvious connection between how I think about those two fields. And I also always feel the same when I'm creating in both fields too. When I'm solving a math problem or designing a new physical model versus composing something. To me, it really feels like the same process of exploration and testing. Although the testing is obviously very different when done in the world of science and in the world of art.
Well,
I just forgot one thing that I mentioned Sibelius as the music of the sky at night. Sibelius was an astronomer, well, amateur astronomer. And there's a crater on Mercury named after him, and there's an asteroid named after Sibelius as well. That's just an interesting fact.
I did not know that, Mike. He's one of my favorites, but I didn't.
Yeah.
Well, I think we are in a good spot. Let's see if our panelists have a last question for the group. Julia, do we have the list of thank yous?
We have our mental lists of thank yous. Sure, between the four of us, we'll get it all.
Okay, let's see if we can do it from the top of our head then. I'll start and you can...
Go for it.
We've written so many lists over the course of making today happen, but it does seem that we've made it through without the whole platform breaking, and that's thanks to New Art City and a huge amount. We have total faith in them. It's just us and our ability to adapt to it as an artistic team. We've managed to connect it together. So we really want to thank them for working tirelessly to create the gallery and to work with us. On the behalf of Multiverse Concert Series, thank you for coming, and I'll just thank again Matt for his guest presentation, and Mike Albro for the wonderful keynote speech. Let's see, maybe I will pass over at this point for some more thank yous.
Yes, absolutely. A huge thank you to all of our speakers, including Lisa here, and to the artists who generously contributed their work to our exhibition, which again will be up for the next year. So we plan on doing some more programming within the gallery. Stay tuned for details. We, of course, are so grateful for the funding we received to help put this event on from the Cultural Office of the Embassy of Spain in Washington, D.C., and the Boston Mayor's Art and Culture COVID-19 grant. I would personally like to thank my fellow organizers. It's been a pleasure. It's like Marichel was saying much earlier in the day, we really were bent on trying to make an experience for our audience that was immersive and meaningful and made people feel like they were coming together in something during a time when we cannot do that. And I certainly have felt like I've been together with a lot of people today, and that's been really wonderful.
Yeah, I think I'll join Julie as well to thanking like our collaborators. It's been a super lovely journey, and today I felt really connected, as like Lisa was saying, like these needs of connection, and throughout the process as well. It's been really fun working with this amazing team. And thanks as well to all our artists, the speakers, the participants, and the audience, more importantly.
Yes. So we do have open networking on Mozilla Hubs right now. If anyone would like to continue the conversations, it's a platform where you can actually speak out loud to one another as a little avatar. So I've shared those links within the gallery. Within the gallery and Zoom chats.
You can like with our voices.
In particular, let us know what you thought, and well, I can certainly say for myself, and hopefully I can convince the others. We want to do this again, and will that be in this format in a year's time? Will it be a hybrid? Do we revisit exoplanets? Do we expand the theme? We have so much of reflection to do, but of course it's fun to think about the distant future. So let us know what you think about the future of events like this.
Absolutely.
Any feedback as well.
See you
and get in touch and talk to us, and Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thanks to everyone.
Right, see you in the hubs.
Bye bye.